Welcome back to the channel and welcome to my alternative end of the year rugby awards, and thank you to any of you who commented on the last video that I posted suggesting categories for these awards. Some of you will see that your suggestions have been taken on board. So in this video, going through some kind of different categories, I suppose, rather than your traditional ones. So we're going to have most impactful player of the year, most valuable team member, comeback of the year, best plucky underdog, unsung hero, moment of the year, and then also a little devil of the year as well at the end. So thank you once again for watching. Welcome back. Hope you're all having a great festive period, whatever it is that you are doing, wherever you've been, whoever you've been seeing, and hopefully being able to fit in and watch a bit of rugby as well. I was at Ashton Gate last night for the Bristol Exeter game from a Bristol perspective and a Bristol fans perspective. Pretty disappointing result. But it's always great this time of year to get out and get to games, always bumper crowds and everyone in a good mood, etc. Before I get into the awards, actually, because some of you on the last video did comment with your suggestions for categories for this one, the video that I'm probably going to do either New Year's Day or early in the new year are going to be my rugby hopes for 2024. So if any of you have suggestions there as well for your hopes, for the sport, for your team, it could be absolutely anything, then drop it in the comments section and let me know. So as I say, welcome back. Make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe and all that sort of thing. But the first end of year award on this channel, most impactful player. Now when I was thinking about this, I was thinking more about what the player does on the pitch. And there's a few different names to run through. There's probably so many in all honesty, but I jotted down a few which came to mind for me. Number one, you've got Unsung, for frankly obvious reasons, made an absolute mess of the England scrum in that semi-final, which England did a great job in for whatever it was, 55 minutes to an hour. He came off the bench and absolutely decimated the England scrum. And from that point, South Africa were able to get themselves back into the game. He consistently made that sort of impact as well, not just in that game. He did well in the final. He did well in a number of other fixtures this year for South Africa. And it's been a heck of a year for him, hasn't it? Even though he hasn't been a guy that necessarily starts for the Boks, I think his stock, the appreciation for what he does, the impact he has never been higher. A couple of other names to throw at you as well. An obvious one is Handré Pollard, coming back into that team, coming on half an hour into a semi-final, being such an important substitution because the style of game that was being played just suiting him as a player better, then starting the final, kicking the goals to win that World Cup final as well. Huge impact from him, even though it's a small sample size. So I'll be honest, he's not winning the award for me, but he is worthy of mention because we're talking about a World Cup here. We're talking about the biggest pressure moments in the sport. And once again, Pollard proved that he is a man for the big occasion. He stepped up brilliantly. I also wanted to give a mention actually to Alex Mitchell, the England scrum half. And that's more because he wasn't even in England's World Cup squad when it was originally announced. The scrum halves were Ben Youngs, Danny Kerr, and then Jack Van Poortvliet. Van Poortvliet got a serious injury. He had to drop out of the squad. Mitchell was the man that came in and actually ended up being the starting scrum half for England. And as we head into 2024, he is the guy, I think, who has that jersey as things stand. His form in the Gallagher Premiership so far has been very, very good, but it was quite a turnaround to go from not even being part of the official World Cup squad, having been part of the training camps in the build-up to it, not being part of the squad, getting called back up into it, and then being the starting nine, and playing well as well for England in that World Cup. So a mention to Alex Mitchell, and then Ben Tamafuna as well, because quite frankly, if we've got a category, most impactful player, boy, is the front rower an impact player. Even though he starts, I know he's not coming off the bench, but I still think the impact he had for his side, for his nation throughout the World Cup was sensational, so I wanted to give him a mention. But the winner of that award, quite easy really, most impactful player, it's Unsung. For the reasons I outlined, the World Cup, the impact he had, how he almost single-handedly was able to change the direction of that semi-final. Unsung for me, most impactful player of 2023. Next award is most valuable team member. There are probably so many players I haven't actually thought of for this award, so I'm interested to know what you will come up with as suggestions. I've got two names to mention. Number one, Jack Morgan, the Wales back rower and captain. And the reason was, I was thinking of value. Wales have had quite a transition this year. I know in the end they were gutted to get knocked out by Argentina in that game that they'll look back on and feel they really, after the form they displayed in the pool stages, will feel they should have been able to get themselves to a semi-final. But I think Jack Morgan has been absolutely crucial to a Welsh side that were in a really terrible place coming into the year, had a tough Six Nations campaign, but actually, despite that Argentina defeat, still had, I think, what we could call and determine a pretty good World Cup. And when you look at the future of that side, even though there are all sorts of issues in the game domestically in the regions and the WRU in the country, Jack Morgan has been a captain, I think, that has breathed a bit of life back into that Welsh team. I think the value he has now got in that team, class operator in the back row, and the impact I think that he's having, the value he adds to the team. I wanted to mention him, but the winner, most valuable team member, I'm going Quagga Smith. And this category is an incredibly subjective one anyway, but I think Quagga Smith doesn't tend to start games, certainly not the big games at the World Cup. He didn't start, he was mostly coming off the bench. But whether he starts, whether he's a replacement, whether you want to go with a 5-3, a 6-2, a 7-1 bench split, you always know that you are going to be getting, I think, at least a 7 out of 10 performance from him. He's hard as nails. He does absolutely everything around the park, both in terms of his defensive work, the stuff he does in attack as well. I don't mean ball in hand and beating defenders, obviously, but even so, the way he fits into that system. Most valuable team member for me was Quagga Smith, a guy that I don't think he even does go underappreciated anymore, actually. I think there is a real appreciation for what he brings to that Box team, even though he wasn't a Dwayne Vermeulen or a Peter Steff or a Sia Khaleesi and those kind of names. Incredibly valuable to those Springboks. So Quagga Smith for me. So a couple of Springboks winning the first 2 awards, but not the next award, which I think is one of the tougher categories. I'm interested to see what you all think. Comeback of the year. I mentioned Pollard already, so I'll give him a quick mention. Was out for quite a long time with injury. His form hadn't been the best. To come back into the team for a semi-final and final and had the impact he's had, as I've mentioned already, that is worthy of a comeback of the year. But for me, it's too small a sample size for him to win this award. Sia Khaleesi actually is another one that is very much worthy of consideration here. Had an ACL injury in the build-up to the World Cup, returned just in time for the World Cup and still was able to play a pivotal role throughout all those games, throughout the key games, all those 1-point wins in the knockout rounds. I've spoken about him previously on this channel, and in fact in the last video as well, about just his importance for the attachment between, I think, the Springbok public and the South African team. So Sia Khaleesi worthy of a mention as well. Following along the same injury route, actually, Antoine Dupont, that cheekbone injury, fractured cheekbone at the World Cup, to still come back in time. I mean, he is just sensational, Antoine Dupont. His performance levels are ridiculous. Having been able and had the opportunity to watch him in the flesh was awesome. And if you ever do have the chance, whether it's, Champions Cup, maybe for a lot of you watching this, and Toulouse are playing your team, I would grab the opportunity with both hands, because he is brilliant and his comeback is worthy of a mention for comeback of the year. And maybe this is a little bit with my England hat on, but actually I'm pretty confident that they deserve a mention. Joe Marler and Dan Cole for that England team and the importance they had in that team in a run to a World Cup semi-final, winning the bronze medal, but that semi-final in particular, where they didn't necessarily get the better of the Springboks for the first 55 to 60 minutes of the game, but they were kind of their equals. The scrum was okay. It was when the replacements came on that South Africa just absolutely dominated it. And who would have thought that Dan Cole, in particular Dan Cole, but Joe Marler possibly as well, would have been starting for England in a World Cup semi-final. If you'd asked that question at the end of last year, that was going to be the reality, I think there's a lot of people that maybe wouldn't have expected it. So they're worthy of a mention. But the winner for comeback of the year, I wonder whether this is going to be quite an unpopular choice. I'm going Ian Foster, and the All Blacks fans probably already outraged at this. I know opinion has been split and unsure on Ian Foster and the job he's done for the All Blacks for quite a while, but I actually think New Zealand had a hell of a year and they came incredibly close to winning that World Cup. A 1-point defeat. They'll look back at moments in the game and opportunities they maybe missed and maybe some officiating that they feel went against them, but they won the Rugby Championship. They built that team. There was improvement in that team. I know it wasn't just Ian Foster. Changes in the coaching department. Joe Schmidt, Jason Ryan coming on board. There were a number of other factors at play. But I still think from where that New Zealand team was last year, being branded the worst New Zealand team we'd seen for decades possibly, or in the professional era or whatever it was, Ian Foster for me is actually the comeback of the year. I feel that's going to be an unpopular choice, but you can let me know. Let's run through some of the others. So, best plucky underdog, unsung hero, moment of the year. What have we got here? Best plucky underdog. For me, this is a straight shootout between Fiji and Portugal. Fiji getting to a World Cup quarter-final is important, significant for the game of rugby as a whole. For that nation to be able to consistently perform to where their potential should be able to get them is really, really important. And I think the fact that they did get to a quarter-final is also a reflection that domestically in the country now, with the viable professional route on the island with the Fijian Drua in Super Rugby, is starting to work. I think we'll see even more benefits from that in another 4 years at the World Cup in 2027. But Fiji, brilliant World Cup, great entertainers, brilliant players in that team. I think a lot of people would go for them. But Portugal as well. And Portugal are the team for me that are the best plucky underdog. No one saw that coming, I don't think. Their performance at the World Cup, they should have had 2 wins. They had that brilliant win against Fiji. They had the draw with Georgia. They pushed Wales. They pushed Australia. They were just an absolute joy for the World Cup. So Portugal, for me, best plucky underdog. I think most people, maybe after the Ian Foster shout possibly upset a few, I think most people would agree with me on the best plucky underdog being Portugal. My unsung hero is Geordie Barrett, the New Zealand inside centre who missed the game against France to start the World Cup, missed the game at Twickenham as well, I think, against the Springboks just before the start of the World Cup. I thought he established himself by the end of the tournament as arguably the best inside centre in the world. Ireland fans might disagree with that with Bundy Aki, but I just think Geordie Barrett's importance to that All Blacks team by the time we got to the World Cup final was pivotal. He was superb. So for me, he is the unsung hero. Maybe he's not unsung. Some of you might suggest that actually there's plenty of people that have an appreciation for what Geordie Barrett does, but I wanted to give him the nod for this award. And then moment of the year. What is your rugby moment of the year? Now, I haven't actually gone for the World Cup here purely because it almost felt too obvious, but having been there in Paris for the Ireland-New Zealand quarter-final, then the next night for the France-South Africa quarter-final, I mean, for me, either of those 2 games would probably be my moment of the year, but I wanted to look elsewhere and just mention a few others as well. So we've got the Duhan van der Merwe try for Scotland. Scotland fans might appreciate that one in the Calcutta Cup. I think it won try of the year at the end of year World Rugby Awards. I'm not quite sure it's the try of the year. There's a heck of a lot of poor tackling and defending from an England point of view in there, but it was a great moment. How far out was it? 50, 60 metres out, beating half the England team, scoring that try at Twickenham. That's worthy of a moment of the year. Fiji-Portugal, as I've already mentioned, I think as a game of the year and a moment of the year was brilliant as well. And then the top 14 final, actually. I forget about this because I don't watch as much of the top 14, but when I was doing a little bit of trying to remind myself of some of the great moments we've had this year, that top 14 final was sensation as well. I'm going for a different final, a different domestic final, well, Champions Cup final, ultimately. That's my moment of the year outside of a lot of the World Cup. That Champions Cup final between Leinster and La Rochelle, the La Rochelle comeback, the drama, the fact that it was in Dublin was brilliant. And I know speaking to people that were at that game almost said it rivaled anything they saw at the World Cup. It was just such a good game, such high quality, international quality game in one of the biggest matches there is in domestic rugby in the world, the significance of the Champions Cup, and what a moment for La Rochelle to come back into it. So it's the Champions Cup final that is my moment of the year. A little devil of the year for you to chuck in at the end. Well, I could have gone for the bunker review system. I didn't think that did anyone any favours when it came to the World Cup. We saw red cards and not understanding the process with someone somewhere making the decision, which we just all got told about later. I don't think that bunker review system has worked in the way that maybe all of us expected it to, possibly, certainly the way World Rugby and the officials expected it to. But Devil of the Year, Eddie Jones. What a tumultuous up and down year the Wallabies had. Him coming in, looking to take them through to the next Lions tour on home soil in 25, then the World Cup on home soil 2 years after that in 2027. His return to the nation that he had been the head coach of before, took them to a World Cup final in 2003. The glorious return. They moved heaven and earth to get rid of Dave Rennie and all the plans they had in place with him. Eddie Jones returns, and what a disaster it was. Worst World Cup the Wallabies have ever had. The first time they've failed to get through the pool. An absolute tonking by Wales in that game in Lyon. Just a mess, a disaster. And then to cap it all off, the interview, which was or wasn't an interview, depending on who you listen to, for the Japan job, and he now has been appointed as the head coach of Japan. Eddie Jones can get my Devil of the Year. What a mess. And I really hope that Australia are able to start building some blocks and improve ahead of that Lions tour and ahead of that World Cup in 2027. Rugby is too small a sport to have a previous giant like Australia so consistently underwhelming. But maybe that is something I can get into in my next video, which will be my hopes for 2024. So drop a comment down below. Who is your most impactful player of the year, your most valuable team member of the year, the comeback of the year, best plucky underdog, unsung hero, moment of the year, and a devil of the year? If you want to throw that in as well, you can comment down below. And also, let me know what your rugby hopes are for 2024. Enjoy the new year, whatever you get up to. Hope you have a great time. Appreciate you watching the video. If you can like it as well, then that just gives it a little boost. Massively appreciate it. And make sure you are subscribed to the channel. But I'll see you in the next one.